think I'd like to ask a question. This will probably be for Mr. Fantini, rather for Mr. Porter and for Mr. Harrington. How do rule of law issues hinder investment and economic opportunity? How can the U.S. support our allies to strengthen rule of law and create an environment for job creation? So there's a little bit of background. I've been treasurer and a congressman for Delaware, been a naval flight officer, and moved to Delaware, got to be elected governor. And before I was sworn in, actually just after I was sworn in as governor, I hosted a former governor to come and have lunch with me at the governor's house. And his name's Bert Carver. He's like a great giant of a man, and older fellow, but he's like very wise, very smart, a very successful businessman, a Democrat. And we sat down and we had lunch, and he said, right to the point, he said, Governor, for you, here's my strongest piece of advice. I hope you'll take this to heart. I said, what would that be, Governor Carville? And he said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I said, would you say that again? And he said, yes, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. He said, do you know what I mean? And I said, I think I do. And I said, you're talking about what is fun, figure out what's important and keep that in mind. He said, yes. And he said at the time, he said, oh gosh, close to 50% of the state of Delaware's revenues came from corporations from America and around the world that are incorporated in Delaware, pay a franchise tax, provide about half of our revenues. One of the reasons why they do that is because we have a great judiciary and with really smart judges and a rule of law, certainty and predictability, which companies are always interested in. And he said, just keep that in mind. Don't be the governor who killed the goose that laid the golden egg. When I led, and I suspect Senator Cornyn heard a fair amount of this when he led a CODEL down to Central America recently. But we heard in one country after that, rule of law, how important rule of law was. We heard that not just from an acknowledgement by the leaders of Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico, but we heard a lot from the business community. We heard from non-business communities as well. Rule of law is critical. If you don't have that, it's like what they used to say about integrity. If you have it, nothing else matters. Integrity, if you don't have it, nothing else matters. And the same is true as rule of law. But how do rule of law issues hinder investment and economic opportunity? And how can the U.S. support our allies and to strengthen the rule of law and create an environment for job creation? And I'm going to ask Mr. Porter if you'd lead off, and then Mr. Harrington, please.
Certainly, Senator. Thank you for the question. You used the word the main thing. I'd echo your sentiment. Corruption, weaknesses in rule of law is among the main thing hindering investment to Northern Central America. I'd note that the IMF has found that $13 billion is lost in productivity annually in Northern Central America, and that Northern Central America, according to Transparency International, ranks among 103, have a worse ranking than 103 of the 180 countries ranked by Transparency International. In actions to counter this, to your point of how we've sort of taken an approach to respond to this. So the first piece I just note is that with Vice President Harris and our call to action partners, we've launched the Good Governance, Good Jobs Declaration, which is our partnership's commitment and actions to combat corruption and to protect labor rights in the region. I'd note that as one first example. That said, Senator, when we think about systemic challenges, corruption in this context is one of those, a systemic challenge. And what we would hope to do, noting that there have been limited significant improvements in this area, is to work with this body and our partners at this table to identify opportunities to work together comprehensively to attack and approach a challenge that at the end of the day is a systemic challenge. Senator, I'd note that as an approach, working together to take this challenge on collaboratively. I'll end there and pass to my colleague.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to commend the work of PCA and Jonathan. We've been partners since the beginning, right? Many of our companies have stepped up with major commitments supporting this effort. This is an effort we've undertaken since the Alliance for Prosperity. Senator Carper, I know you've been very involved since then, even if not before. And I think you said it it's funny because I've had the same thought before. You can talk about supply chain resiliency. You can talk about building things like digital connectivity. You can talk about ensuring resilient healthcare systems, all the things we're focused on. But if you don't have rule of law, you have nothing. I think that's really well said. And I think that in this case for business, what is the impact? As I think a lot of you who've been in business previously know very well, business is certainty. Certainty for business is everything. And what lack of adherence to the rule of law does is it undermines business certainty. And so businesses are going to go and look for other options and other locations in which to invest, which in the case of Northern Central America, we can't afford collectively. What can we do about it? I think one of the things that we set out early on in working with PCA and other stakeholders in this effort is suggesting ways in which we can strengthen institutional capacity building, working with public sector partners and ensuring that they're committed to upholding the rule of law. And certainly governance in the region, frankly speaking, remains, I think, one of the biggest challenges we see coming from 2014 when President Obama launched the alliance to now. I think that still remains the biggest impediment. Something else we can do, promote the adoption of business ethics and good governance programs. The Commerce Department has great programs in this area, and I think those are things, Jonathan can correct me, but I think those are things that PCA and the Vice President's office have leveraged. This one's key too, deploying digital tools. One of our members has a great anecdote that says, a bit can't take a bribe. So when you're talking about digital tools enhancing transparency, ensuring that in customs, in permitting, in licensing, in taxation, you avoid having the urge of a customs official, for example, to take a bribe. It's actually not possible if you can digitize everything. Lastly, and I'll leave it here, really working with partners to combat IP piracy and counterfeiting as well. It's critical in the region.
Good. My thanks to both of you for your response to that question. I'm going to yield now to Senator Cornyn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.